One evening, I only meant to scroll through a few dinner recipe photos. A few minutes later, I was staring at someone's magazine perfect kitchen, and my own suddenly felt smaller. I set my phone down and looked at our dining table. The same table that had been full of Mira's laughter earlier somehow seemed less appealing now. Nothing in my house had changed. Nothing was broken, and no new bills had arrived, yet my mood felt noticeably different. I tried to brush the feeling aside. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe it would disappear tomorrow, but it stayed with me. My name is Clara, and that was when something uncomfortable started becoming clear. Every time I opened social media, I came away feeling like I had less, even though I had never left home. That morning, I packed a simple lunch for Mira. Rice, an egg, and some sliced fruit felt like enough, just as they usually did. Before leaving for school, I opened social media for a moment. A lunchbox shaped like a cartoon character appeared on my screen, perfectly arranged and polished. I looked back at the lunch I had just made. Somehow it seemed ordinary now, even though 5 minutes earlier I had been satisfied with it. During the weekly grocery trip, I reached for the brand we always bought. Then I remembered a video saying premium products were better for families, and my hand paused. I still bought what fit our budget. Yet on the way home, a quiet feeling of guilt stayed with me without a clear reason. That afternoon, Mira played in the living room. Her toys were scattered everywhere as she laughed and built a castle from old cardboard boxes. I took a photo of Mira and glanced at other family photos online. Once again, what I was looking at seemed to lose something, even though nothing had actually changed. A few days later, I started noticing a pattern. The feeling that I wasn't doing enough always seemed to show up after I spent time scrolling. At first, I pushed the thought away. I told myself I was only looking for ideas and inspiration. But those moments rarely left me feeling motivated. More often, they left me with the sense that I was behind. I found myself looking at other people's homes, their vacations, and even their children's clothes. Without realizing it, I started measuring my own life against all of it. Every time I saw something better, the target moved again. My standards kept rising, little by little. I was starting to feel tired. The finish line I kept chasing never seemed to stay in the same place. One morning, I saw a photo of someone's living room while scrolling. Before I realized it, I was already thinking about buying new decorations for ours. A few minutes later, I paused and asked myself a question. Did I actually want those things? Or did I just want a life that looked like that? That question stayed with me longer than I expected. I sat there quietly because I didn't have an answer. A few days later, I saw photos from another family's vacation. Almost immediately, our own life started to feel too simple. Yet, just a month earlier, we had spent an afternoon at the city park. Mira came home with the happiest smile I had seen in a long time. I started noticing a contradiction I couldn't ignore. Some of our best memories never looked especially impressive. But the things that made me feel envious were usually the ones that looked expensive on a screen. That thought stayed with me longer than the images themselves. Our life was actually going well. The bills were paid, and the house still felt warm at the end of the day. Armand still joked with us during dinner. Mira still came home excited to tell stories about her day. There wasn't a major problem to solve. There wasn't any family crisis hanging over us. Even so, I kept feeling behind. The strange part was that I couldn't tell who I was trying to catch up with. I started thinking about things that had never occupied my mind before. A new sofa, a new shelf, a new set of clothes. The list kept getting longer, yet our budget hadn't changed at all. And the most exhausting part was this. I was no longer enjoying the things we already had. One rainy afternoon, the sound of heavy rain filled the house. We were all home together with nowhere else to be. The power went out for a few minutes without warning. The television went dark, and the internet disappeared with it. Myra gathered a few blankets from around the house. Before long, she had built a small fort in the middle of the living room. Armand and I crawled inside with her. For a while, the three of us laughed like children. After nearly an hour of playing, Mira spoke softly. She said it had been her favorite day of the week. I smiled and asked why. The question felt simple in that quiet moment. Mira answered in the simplest way. When she said I hadn't been looking at my phone all the time, the words stayed with me longer than she knew. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Mira's words stayed with me long after the house had gone quiet. As I kept thinking about it, I realized it wasn't about money. It wasn't about a bigger house or better things either. What seemed missing wasn't something I could buy. It was my attention. I had been spending so much time inside other people's lives. Without noticing, I was less present in my own. I always assumed social media was making me want more things. That was the explanation I kept returning to. But the effect felt deeper than that. It made it harder for me to feel like what we had was enough. And once that feeling of enough starts slipping away, no amount ever seemed sufficient. The thought stayed with me in the quiet. A few nights later, I finally brought it up with Armand. We sat quietly at the dining table after Mira had gone to bed. "I've been feeling strange lately," I said quietly. The words sounded small as they finally left my mind. Armand looked at me for a moment. Then he simply asked, "What do you mean?" I told him that I kept feeling like our life was missing something. I also admitted that it sounded unreasonable even as I said it aloud. Armand stayed quiet for a few seconds. Then a small smile appeared on his face. He told me that he often felt our family was doing just fine. That's why he had been confused by how sad I seemed lately. For the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. I had been carrying that pressure alone, and most of it hadn't come from real life at all. The next day, I started cleaning up my social media feeds. I scrolled through familiar accounts and quietly decided what I wanted to keep seeing. I unfollowed a few accounts. It wasn't because they were doing anything wrong, but because I knew how they affected me. I also began limiting how much time I spent scrolling. It wasn't perfect, but I was paying more attention to it than before. Whenever I caught myself making comparisons, I returned to one simple question. What am I not seeing behind this photo? Then another question followed. Would Mira remember this thing? Or would she remember me being there with her? Those questions helped pull my attention back to real life. The thoughts in my head became a little quieter, and real life felt warmer than I remembered. The ordinary moments around me seemed easier to notice again. A few weeks later, our home still looked exactly the same. The sofa, the kitchen, and even our budget hadn't changed much at all. What felt different was the way I looked at those everyday things. The house hadn't changed, but something in my perspective had. I was beginning to notice that a good life doesn't always look impressive on a screen. Sometimes it looks more like a simple dinner, a child's laughter, and a peaceful night of sleep. If this story feels familiar to you, I'm glad you're here with Clara's Family Journal. We're learning together how to build a healthier family life, one step at a time. And now I'm curious about your experience. What's one thing social media made you feel you needed, only to realize later that you really didn't?